On Thursday, Cleveland police announced 28-year-old Aaliyah Henderson has been charged in the gut-wrenching case.
How you doing, sir?
Police were called near East 162nd Street and Midland Avenue, right next to Ginn Academy, just after 6 o'clock Monday night, after a dog walker made the grim discovery.
It's a suitcase. I've been walking past it for about a week now, and I walk my dog over there, and she keeps stopping, and she sniff a little too long. I pulled it up, unzipped it. I couldn't really see, and I opened it up and hid.
Officers later found a second shallow grave nearby, with another suitcase containing the body of a second young girl. Investigators say the victims were 10-year-old Amor Wilson and 8-year-old Mila Chapman. DNA testing revealed they were half-sisters.
Police in Cleveland have now charged a mother with aggravated murder for her 2 little girls who were found buried inside a suitcase near a school field. The victims are now identified as Mila Chatham, 8 years old, and Amor Wilson, 10 years old. They were half-sisters. This is the Hill of Justice. Their bodies were discovered when a man walking his dog noticed something strange in the ground, a suitcase, and inside that suitcase, a child. Then police searched the area. 25 feet away, another suitcase, another child. But the part of this case that hits the hardest isn't what happens next. It's Mila's father that says he had been trying his best to find his daughter for 5 years, trying to get custody. And at this point in time, they were trying to track down, he was doing his best to track down where their living situation was. He says he didn't even know where his daughter was. And then detectives called him and told him she was dead. But here's a question investigators are now trying to answer. If a father had been searching for the child for years, how did 2 little girls end up buried in suitcases within view of where they lived? And what matters more is the timeline that led to it. So here we are. They found the suitcases near a high school. And this goes a little bit to some of your homicide days, location. And then naturally, we're talking about after the location, we need to find out who these people are that are in these suitcases. But location tells us a lot. So just walk us a little bit on your end of it when you have 2 slightly decomposed bodies in a suitcase and they're young like this.
Right. Well, let's start with location. There's only one reason to move a body, and that's to separate you as being a suspect. If it's a dead body found in your house, then of course you're a suspect. So you've got to move the body someplace else because you don't want the body somewhere associated with you. So that's the only reason to move a body. The other thing that's obvious here is we're no doubt dealing with some type of mental health issue with the mother. And you and I have discussed these type of cases before. We talked about one where a little boy didn't show up to school for a few days and his mother had mental health issues and he was still in the house when they did a welfare check. The sad part about that case, and I think we're probably going to find this case too, is this. I'm sure when they look at this, going to be obvious signs that this one was mentally ill and no one said nothing or did anything. And we've got to get past that where we quit taking action. But then probably the reason you see people reluctant to take action, as we know now with the type of court systems and DAs, no good deed goes unpunished. So people who have taken action end up sued or prosecuted. So now everybody just wants to, mind their own business. And it's created a very, very dangerous situation. But the fact that the father's been looking for his daughters for 5 years and that the mother has evaded him and then she does something like this, no doubt she was a person that was really probably unfit to be a mother. And I'm surprised the kids weren't taken into some type of protective custody. And maybe they have, and we don't know about it yet. Maybe they were taken and returned. But there's no doubt we're dealing with some type of mental health issue here.
Right. And so, of course, I had when I first became apprised of the, story, I had no doubt that this was going to be solved rather quickly, especially because of the fact that we had half sisters and somebody had to know something about that. I mean, and then, you know, I don't think a lot of people realize that luggage can be tracked, on top of that, but it didn't even need to get that far. It really, we know that the transport of the luggage is concealment and to move the bodies around quick. But I just thought that, you know, I mean, did you have any doubt that this
No,
was
no,
gonna?
because this is a simple case of victimology. The one thing when you work in homicides, first thing you want to do is victimology. Who's the victim? Well, you're dealing with kids. So kids, it's not like they got a job. It's not like they uh, can move off on their own. So they're being taken care of by somebody. If it's not their parents, it's an uncle, a foster parent, or something like that.
Mhm,
And so right there is your victimology. So you find two kids, once you identify who they are, well, were they reported missing? And if
mhm.
they were, how long ago were they reported missing? I mean, that's a pretty easy case to work back. If there's a case where they're unidentified and we have no idea who they are, but again, you know, the fact that they're kids, more than likely, and the fact that they weren't so decomposed that they couldn't figure out the identities of who they were, I know that was gonna be relatively quick.
Yeah, me too. And according to the research from the United States Department of Justice, most child homicide victims are harmed by someone within their caretaker circle. And
Absolutely.
this speaks to a little bit what you're talking about, parents, guardians,
And
family
most people are
members.
killed by people they know.
Right.
Before there was a cell phone, you go to homicide school, they said there's a high percentage time that if you go to their address book, the killer's name and phone numbers in there. Of course, we don't use address books anymore. We have cell phones, smartphones. And 9 times out of 10, when you find someone that's dead, if you can get access to their phone, that person's contact information who killed them is in there. People kill people they know. I'm not saying there aren't stranger to stranger homicides. They're rare and they're harder to solve. But usually you can go, that's where your victimology comes in that. And you can pretty much figure out who did or perpetrated that crime of murder.
Now let's go back to this. We have the father saying that he was searching for his child for 5 years. And what was odd about that to me, and I'll love to get your take about this, is that we didn't have a missing persons report. We didn't have, that to itself was kind of odd that he's looking for 5 years and there's no, initially when they found these bodies, there was no such report of a missing persons for any one of these two children.
Well, that's
So
not too odd. I mean, that's more of a custody type thing, where you got the father, the mother, the kids are in their custody and they just kind of leave. And I'm not saying that's not a missing persons report, but it's not one, you kind of know where the kids are. They just purposely not wanting to trying to keep them away. And that's mostly handled by court orders and stuff like that, as opposed to saying they're missing like they're endangered. Does that make sense?
yeah, that makes sense. But the oddity is they're school aged. The oddity is, well, how come the schools didn't report it? The oddity is naturally they were decomposed a little bit. So we've got some time and we're in the smack of the school year. So that's
Well,
where the
what I'm
oddity
talking
is at.
about, if he hasn't seen them in 5 years, I mean, it's very
Sure, I see what you're
possible
saying on that
she
end.
can move somewhere and enroll him in a school. And I don't think there's a national school database. Now, if he had reported them missing, like endangered, missing endangered, like we have no idea where they're at or whatever, that kind of changes the game a little bit. But I think what you're saying is if they were decomposed, they've been dead for a while. I mean, at least a week or so.
For sure.
So that
Right.
meant that they haven't attended school in a week.
Right.
So you would think that there would be something from the school system saying, hey, your child hasn't been here for a week. Maybe someone should check. Now, of course, you know, a parent can kind of run interference with that, can say, well, they got the flu or whatever, and it might be a week or two for their back. So they can kind of hold that off for a little while.
Mhm.
But I see what you're saying there.
Yeah. So, I mean, if the dad is claiming that he had been trying to at least gain some type of emergency custody, something should have been on file um, regarding that.
More than likely, that would be on file with the courts, though, not in file like NCIC. I don't know if that would go in NCIC like a missing person. I think that would be a court order that, hey, I haven't seen my child and I want this people to come. I want my child's mother to come to court so I can get visitation rights.
Hmm.
So, but in that situation, she'd have to be served so she could come to court. And if they can't locate her to serve her, it kind of hangs out there. If that makes sense.
Well, then, yeah, that makes sense, but maybe we need to start discussing. Maybe it should,
I agree. I
because
agree.
maybe we can go ahead. I mean, we've covered child homicides here on the show, and the running theme is where we had these children missing, and nobody, the institutions failed them. And this might be another way that you can shore up some of those loopholes, especially if the father has been watching, or at least saying that he's, was setting up some type of emergency custody for them.
No, I think you got a good point there. We got to be honest about something. Most of the time, when you report somebody missing, authorities don't go look for the person. They just don't. What they do is they take a report and they'll enter them on the NCIC computer. And hopefully, if they're stopped at a traffic stop or stop walking somewhere and the officer runs their name, then they'll say, hey, you're a missing person. And now go in the system. Someone can say, okay, well, they were stopped. Or if you're a juvenile, you're a runaway, then it'll be in the system. And of course, they got the authority to hold you then because you're underage. But the truth of the matter is, when a person says, my son, daughter, wife, whatever is missing, they write a report, they enter it in the computer, and that's it. Now, a lot of that depends on the leadership. And a lot of leadership right now is lackluster, and there's this attitude, well, they'll show up. They're probably just doing this or doing that. That happened a lot in my county where it's just a matter you take the report or whatever. So I tried to change that culture. There'd be a missing person, and then I'd find out about it. And I assign at least 2 or more deputies. Go
Mhm.
start checking to see where this person's at. Go check with their friends. Go look around or whatever like that. But the truth of the matter is, the average person, when they call the police to report someone's missing, there's not a whole lot of immediate action taken on that.
Right.
And of course, we've always heard this thing about 24 hours, which is damn ridiculous because a lot can happen in 24 hours.
Beautiful.
So, and of course, people going to blame, well, we don't have the manpower to look for somebody every time someone's missing. Some people do abuse the system. And a wife might be mad because the husband's coming in late and she suspects he's cheating. So she'll go ahead and do a missing person report to have the cops look for him. All of that I know plays a part in the picture. But we still got to do a better job with that because waiting 24 hours or just putting it on the computer and letting it go, there's a lot of times where lives could have been saved if someone actually at least do a preliminary, at least knock on some doors and check some leads to see where the person is at.
Right.
Instead of just putting it in the computer and say, hey, let us know something 24 hours later. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And I don't want to get anybody confused. Although we got 2 aggravated murder counts against the mother, this case is far from being over. Have no illusions. Those suitcases being found near that high school was just the dump site. I mean, we got to find exactly where the primary site is at. Explain a little bit to the audience what I'm talking about when it comes to that.
Exactly. So where the body is left is not the scene of the murder. So you got to determine where that scene is at. No doubt they've gotten a search warrant for wherever they live at, and they're probably there right now searching for trace evidence. Um, she probably, if there was blood involved, she probably cleaned it up. So they're going to have to, use all the scientific CSI methods to discover the blood, like luminol. where you can actually spray this chemical and you can actually see the blood stains glowing from that once you cut the lights off, and they can kind of reconstruct them by looking at the patterns. They could probably tell, if they can't tell by the body itself, whether it was blunt trauma or a gunshot or a stab or whatever. And then, of course, the blood patterns will tell you a lot about that too. But they've got to discover where that's at, because there's going to be trace evidence there. So you're looking for blood, you're looking for fingerprints, you're looking for hair, you're looking for anything that shows that this is the scene and proof of the fact that this is the person that actually did the murder. Because we don't know a lot right now. They just arrested her. She could well be confessing, and she
Right.
could well be telling them what happened, her version of it, and walking them through it. Or she may not be saying anything at all, and they got her in custody, but they have enough to have her in custody, and they're looking for witnesses and any type of physical evidence to prove the scene.
Right. And so, we're going to ask questions like, where were the girls last seen? When was the last time they attended school? Ask neighbors, some of the questions that you were asking, have they seen them? Things of that nature.
Once they figured out who these girls were, and the first person they're going to talk to is her. When they start asking questions, they're probably questions she couldn't answer, and it probably put her in a predicament where she confessed, or they pretty much knew it was her. But if her daughters were missing for a few days and they went, "Hey, we just found your daughter's in a suitcase. You know anything about it?" And she's like, "No, I don't know." Well, when the last time you seen her?
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's
It pretty
over.
much puts her in a corner and pretty much put her in check, if not checkmate. And that's
Right.
pretty much the end of it. There's one thing I'd like to say. You brought up something that's a very, very good point when you talk about how we've got to do a much better job of when people are reported missing. But there's one thing that's going on in school systems I don't quite understand. It has to do with politics. I created a truancy unit, and their job was to go out every day and look for kids that were truant. And it was really a simple theory. The theory is, okay, wherever you see a lot of daytime burglaries, more than likely that's done by truants. So if we could check the school and see who was out of school that day and check with their parents, and their parents couldn't account for them, that could well be our suspect. So what we try to do is ask the school, hey, can we know what kids did not show up at school today that is unauthorized by their parents? And it was a whole lot of political stuff. They didn't want to give us that information, and why we don't understand. Because I would think any parent whose child is not in school and they don't know about it would like to be notified and would like to know there's someone actually trying to locate their kids. You know, truancy is not, they're not just committing crimes, but sometimes they're doing other things they shouldn't be doing. They could be at a house drinking and involved in sexual relations, which could expose them to pregnancy or whatever. It's just a good thing to do to keep kids in school. When you keep your truancy level down, that's it. But just that right there gave me an idea of the politics and the bureaucracy. Just my guy simply asking, hey, look, can we come here every day and see who's not in school? And then figure out what parents don't know their kids not in school so we can go look for them. And that was a nightmare, and it never came to fruition. And no one
Right.
can give us a real reason why. Well, that's how you get to stuff like this. If a system like that was in order, it would be suspicious, and people would know, okay, these girls didn't come to school today, and we made contact with the parent. Okay, well, we made contact with the parent. Well, what did the parent say? Well, this is a parent known with mental health issues. Well, let's just go do a welfare check. And that type of consistency can stop things like this from happening. But unfortunately, we've got a bureaucracy in government where they either just don't care or they're incompetent, and they don't see the need to be proactive. Matter of fact, proactive is shunned and frowned against. And until we change that culture, we're going to continue to see these type of murders.
Right. And, what will be fascinating is at this point in time, have no illusions. I'm 100% behind you when it comes to the mental health or the lack of assistance or resources for this mother is got to be palpable at this point in time because the psychology of leaving these two suitcases by a high school like this, just of course, and close to her home. I mean, obviously there is, a degradation of your mental health. I mean, you're not even really doing much to really hide. Your only hiding part was just in the grave site. It was super shallow. It was
Exactly.
sticking up and everything like that. I mean, the dog went over there to knew that something was odd and was digging around it. So, of course, it smelled a decomposing body, unfortunately. But the psychology of you just letting your child, whatever the manner of death is, we're going to find out what that is. Uh, but I do want to talk about a little bit about the manner of death because we're talking about two children. I don't know how big the mother is, and I don't know how big the children are, but similar in size and in age. We're talking about 8 and a 10-year-old. Um, how to how they would she would have to incapacitate them to put them into this type of, situation is that's where the disturbing part
Right.
comes in. You know what I
Right.
mean?
We don't know the cause of death. We don't know
Right.
if it's stabbing, shooting, blunt trauma, suffocation. We don't know. The suitcase is the height. She can't walk out of the house with her body. So she had to put them in a suitcase so it doesn't look like she's carrying a body. I don't know how big these suitcases are, but that's when you see stuff like dismemberment because they can't fit a whole body in there. So there's a possibility we may see that as well. And
Yeah.
then part of the reason why you may not see the two burials as opposed to one, you got to look at this woman's physicality and size. It's not
Sure.
digging graves is man's work. I'm not being sexist with that because there's men who can't do it. So when I say that's man's work, I mean you got to have some grit and some strength to dig a grave. So that's probably why it's a shallow grave. She don't really have the muscle to build to dig a grave 6 foot deep. And the guys who do that for a living are pretty guys that have physicality because it's no joke.
Sure.
So, she probably got tired after the second bite. She could only go so deep, so it was shallow because of the lack of physicality. And then by the time the other one, she was probably too tired and disorientated to do it.
And then you're talking about the other part of this whole situation is, um, if it gets to this part, is how to make this case trial ready. you
Right,
know, and
right.
thus, a lot of people say, "Oh, well, this was quick, this was fast," and so on and so forth. You can't get tripped up with that. You still have to go through the paces of a rigorous investigative case and check all the boxes all the way through because especially considering that this could be, a mental health, defense.
Right, right, right. No
And
doubt,
just
no
and
doubt.
and to let people know, not because you have a mental health illness, it doesn't, of course, excuse you from the crime itself. You'll still be put through the paces, but and I don't want people to get mental health illness confused with an insanity case. A lot of people will go ahead and try to make that
What's
connective
the
tissue.
difference? What's the difference?
So when you have the mental health issue, you could say that that is episodic in itself. You could say temporary insanity also on that end of it. But with the mental health portion of it, it's really a documented illness over a period of time where the insanity could have been a snap situation on that end of it. So the courts do see it a little bit different. So it's just one of those things where um, you still have to go ahead and be guided by best practices when you're getting this together for what could be a trial. It may be one of those things where it isn't, but we won't know. Um, but I don't see, although these are aggravated murder charges, that in itself that that the state has charged them with probably takes off the board, unless they find some aggravating circumstances, which I don't see here just readily, a capital murder charge. Do you see that?
Probably not if it's dealing with mental health, but this brings up another issue. Two issues have come up here that we've talked about: the system and where there's fallacies there. We covered the part about missing persons and truancy, and how if those things were handled different, we might not be here.
Mhm.
But back in 1965, there was this mental health act that was signed by President Kennedy,
Mhm.
and it was well meaning. I don't think they really thought it all the way through, but it ended up closing most of the mental health detention centers across the nation, because the vision was that it could be outpatient treatment and that would suffice. But I don't think people really thought it through, because it's not like folks with mental health, you can depend on them to go and keep their appointments and take their medicine.
Mhm.
So mental health detention centers are very, very necessary. And some of it has to be long term and some of it has to be permanent. 40% of the homeless people are mental health patients, because there's no mental health detention center for them to go, and they can't stay with their relatives because it's too dangerous, and because most people are not going to be able to facilitate that or whatever.
Mhm.
So, I see three things wrong with the system that can prevent things like this from happening. This is probably a woman that should have been in either a long-term or permanent mental health facility, but that's not available. And because no one's taking that type of preventative action, she was allowed to keep these kids in her custody and
Right.
then end up eventually killing them. If there was long-term or permanent mental health, she probably would be there and those kids wouldn't be in her custody for this to happen. Uh, those type of detention centers have to open back up. Uh, people talk about we're criminalizing mental health. Well, I mean, a crime is a crime is a crime. You can't just say, okay, well, you killed someone, but you're mentally ill. Just
Sure.
go back home. It's not that. But there's a preventative thing that can be done, because people who are a danger to themselves and a danger to others need to be in a mental health facility, and that could stop them from going to a prison facility.
Right.
Even though they're being locked away from society, it's different there than it would be in a prison, and then they could get the type of care and medication they need, and then they get protected. The public is protected from them, and quite frankly, in some ways, they get protected from the public.
Right. 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 So I think that if somebody wants to ask, if we're talking about the mental health aspect of this, psychotic breaks that people have, and it's documented, these disorders, it speaks more so to that, because obviously this woman didn't want to be found by at least her child's father. And there could be a myriad of reasons for that. So to speculate on that, we just don't know. But of course, at this point in time, I mean, the behavior of putting these children in suitcases like this, and not even the best way of trying to conceal this, except
Right.
just putting in, you know, when we take a look at the insanity portion of this, yeah, we can have a break, but we're talking once again, um, about a situation where at least the actions, according to the law, can say that this was just not only temporary in nature, but this was, um, an event that happened that you can go ahead and come back into some type of normalcy. It's kind of hard with the illness because there's a pattern and you need a whole type of medication and so on and so forth. So,
Right.
it's unfortunate, right?
It is. It is. But it's going to take some strong leadership to put things in place so this type of stuff can be prevented.
Right, right, right. Timeline's going to be very important here. And
Yeah.
so putting that all together is where we're going to see how all this matters, because this isn't an indictment just on the mother. I think we're going to see an indictment on the system, um, as it relates to the children. The children's father is certainly raising those issues right now, and
You're right. It is an indictment on the system. I mean, you got the school system, who they need better ways to monitor when kids don't show up to school. You got the government, which should be doing a better job of making sure that people with mental health or in secure places instead of just letting them stay on the street or whatever like that. It's a failure that we're seeing in so many different places. And somebody's got to take the bull by the horn
Right.
because we end up in situations like this, or we end up with people that just flip out and just start shooting people like we saw here in Atlanta. And all of them are known mental health cases,
Right.
but there's no place that nobody has to put these people in so that they won't be a danger to themselves or others.
Sure.
And now the
So
jails have become the mental health facilities, and that's just not working.
right. So we're breaking coverage on once again. Police in Cleveland have now charged a mother with aggravated murder of her two little children, girls. As you know, they were found inside the suitcase near a school field. So, um, brother, that's another one we talk about, one of these cases where we swallow hard, and we were, when we first started talking about doing the show tonight, um, we were left with a bunch of questions, but some of those questions have been answered now, and there's still turmoil for that community who has to deal with the after effects because these children live long enough for a lot of people to know them.
Yeah, and again, this is an indictment on the system because this is not one of those things where, okay, oh, wow, Cleveland did an excellent job. They solved it. I mean, it's really, I'm not criticizing Cleveland police, but this is where I'm going with this. This is a this is cleaning up a mess that was allowed to happen because nobody intervened. You know what
Right.
I'm saying?
True.
It's not like, wow, this is some whodunit murder and we did some serious investigation and we were able to get justice. There is no justice in this one because you got a person with mental health that should have been getting care and treatment years ago, but no one intervened, and two kids lost as a result of it, and two kids that were probably living in misery and bad situation because the government or people were so lackadaisical or non-caring that no one took the initiative to step in and use the authority they had to do something about it. So from school to Department of Children's Services to just general law enforcement allowing mental health people to go around with no intervention whatsoever, you end up with a travesty. This is what happens when you see complacency and lackadaisicalness in government. This is what
Yeah.
you end up with here. So this is not a situation where, oh, hey, remember this case? That's great police work. That's not. I'm not saying it's bad police work, but
Right.
if everyone was doing their job, we wouldn't even be here.
Right. Right. This is one of these cases where, the whodunit is solved, but the issue then becomes that an after action report on how to go ahead and not make this stuff happen again. That's where
Exactly. And
we're
this
at.
ain't a who done it. This is a
Right.
smoking gun.
Right.
This wasn't some big mystery or whatever.
Right.
This is again uh failure of intervention,
Right.
deliberate indifference,
Right.
apathy of government, which we see so much now.
Right. So we'll conclude the today's show. Our thoughts and prayers are certainly with the family of Mila Chapman and Amor Wilson, two young girls, 8 and 10, who have been taken away tragically in Cleveland. And our hearts go out to that community and the aftermath of what they have to deal with. And certainly on our end of it, the show will go ahead and certainly put up any type of missing persons telephone number for anyone who's experiencing something like that. See something, say something. If you know something is odd or not in place, it's our civic duty to go ahead and do what we need to do to go ahead and protect all children out there. So, brother, without further ado, thank you for your help today and getting this case out there to the folks as soon as possible.
Oh, absolutely. Take care,
Okay,
brother.
take care.